Welcome to the Bible Quiz and Trivia channel. Today, we're diving into the deep teachings and complex themes of the Book of Colossians. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and like this video to support our content. After the quiz, share your score in the comments. We love seeing how well you do. Are you ready? Let's get started. Question 1. Who is traditionally believed to have authored the Book of Colossians? A. Peter. B. John. C. Paul. D. James. Answer: C. Paul. Paul is traditionally credited with the authorship of Colossians, which is supported by references within the text itself, asserting his role as the writer, Colossians 1:1. Question 2. To whom was the Book of Colossians addressed? A. The church in Corinth. B. The church in Ephesus. C. The church in Galatia. D. The church in Colossae. Answer: D. The church in Colossae. The letter is specifically addressed to the Christians in Colossae, a small Phrygian city near Laodicea and part of the Roman province of Asia Minor. Colossians 1-2. Question 3. What is the main theme of Colossians? A. The end times and Christ's return. B. Church unity and love. C. The supremacy of Christ and full sufficiency in Him. D. The role of apostles in the early church. Answer: C. The supremacy of Christ and full sufficiency in Him. Colossians emphasizes the supremacy of Christ and teaches that believers are complete in Him, countering errors that suggested additional spiritual practices were necessary for salvation. Colossians 2:10. Question 4. What specific heresy is Paul addressing in the letter to the Colossians? A. Gnosticism. B. Arianism. C. Judaism. D. Pelagianism. Answer: A. Gnosticism. Paul addresses early forms of Gnostic ideas in Colossians, which posited that secret knowledge and observances were needed beyond Christ for spiritual completeness. Colossians 2:18-23. Question 5. How does Paul describe Jesus in Colossians 1:15-20? A. As a wise teacher. B. As the image of the invisible God and the firstborn over all creation. C. As a descendant of David. D. As a moral philosopher. Answer: B. As the image of the invisible God and the firstborn over all creation. Paul describes Jesus with a high Christological view, emphasizing his divine nature and preeminence in creation and the church. Colossians 1:15-20. Question 6. What does Paul say about the supremacy of Christ in creation and redemption? A. Christ is a part of creation. B. Christ is secondary to the Father. C. Christ is the creator of all things and has reconciled all things to himself. D. Christ's role in creation is minimal. Answer: C. Christ is the creator of all things and has reconciled all things to himself. Paul teaches that Christ is supreme over all creation because all things were created through him and for him, and he reconciled everything through his blood. Colossians 1:16-20. Question 7. How does Colossians describe the reconciliation brought about by Christ? A. As a future event. B. As necessary only for the Gentiles. C. As happening through his death on the cross to present us holy in God's sight. D. As symbolic. Answer: C. As happening through his death on the cross to present us holy in God's sight. Colossians explains that Christ's death provided reconciliation by making believers holy and blameless before God, fundamentally changing their spiritual status. Colossians 1:22. Question 8. What does Paul mean by Christ in you, the hope of glory? A. A metaphor for moral improvement. B. The expectation of earthly wealth. C. The indwelling presence of Christ as the assurance of eternal glory. D. A call to religious rites. Answer. C. The indwelling presence of Christ as the assurance of eternal glory. This phrase highlights the mystical union between Christ and the believer, indicating that Christ's indwelling presence is the assurance and hope of future glorified life. Colossians 1:27. Question 9. How does Paul describe his own suffering in Colossians? A. As unjust and unnecessary. B. As a cause for shame. C. As a joy and on behalf of the church, filling up what is lacking in Christ's afflictions. D. As minimal and inconsequential. Answer. C. As a joy and on behalf of the church, filling up what is lacking in Christ's afflictions. Paul speaks of his sufferings as something he endures joyfully for the sake of the church, contributing to the church's welfare and connecting with Christ's own sufferings. Colossians 1:24. Question 10. What is the mystery mentioned in Colossians? A. The end times. B. The identity of the Antichrist. C. Christ in you, the hope of glory, referring to the indwelling of Christ in Gentiles. D. The location of the Garden of Eden. Answer. C. Christ in you, the hope of glory, referring to the indwelling of Christ in Gentiles. The mystery mentioned is the universal inclusion of Gentiles in the salvation offered through Christ, which was previously hidden, but now revealed. Colossians 1:26-27. Question 11. How does Colossians define the fullness found in Christ? A. As partial and incomplete. B. As the full deity dwelling bodily and believers being complete in him. C. As accessible only through angelic mediators. D. As achieved through rigorous ascetic practices. Answer. B. As the full deity dwelling bodily and believers being complete in him. Paul asserts that Christ embodies the fullness of deity, and believers are made complete in him, negating the need for any additional spiritual practices or mediators. Colossians 2:9-10. Question 12. What does Paul advise about earthly versus heavenly focus in Colossians 3? A. To focus on earthly wealth and status. B. To set minds on things above, not on earthly things. C. To balance both equally. D. To disregard all earthly duties. Answer. B. To set minds on things above, not on earthly things. Paul advises believers to set their hearts and minds on heavenly realities rather than earthly concerns, aligning their lives with their heavenly position in Christ. Colossians 3:1-2. Question 13. What instructions does Paul give about Christian household behavior? A. Wives should lead households. B. Husbands and wives should live separately. C. Wives submit to husbands. Husbands love wives. Children obey parents. Fathers not provoke children. D. There should be no structure in Christian households. Answer. C. Wives submit to husbands. Husbands love wives. Children obey parents. Fathers not provoke children. Paul lays out a reciprocal set of responsibilities to maintain order and express love within Christian households, emphasizing mutual respect and care. Colossians 3:18-21. Question 14. How does Colossians address the relationship between masters and slaves? A. Endorses harsh treatment as necessary. B. Masters provide for slaves, and slaves obey with sincerity as to the Lord. C. Advocates immediate and total abolition. D. Ignores the issue entirely. Answer. B. Masters provide for slaves, and slaves obey with sincerity as to the Lord. Paul addresses this relationship by urging fairness and justice for masters and sincere, heartfelt obedience from slaves, viewing their roles as service to Christ rather than merely to human masters. Colossians 3:22 4-1. Question 15. What does Paul instruct regarding prayer and witnessing to outsiders? A. To avoid interacting with outsiders. B. To pray continually, be wise in interactions, and let conversations be full of grace. C. To focus only on prayer, not on conduct. D. To keep faith private and not engage in discussions. Answer. B. To pray continually, be wise in interactions, and let conversations be full of grace. Paul emphasizes the importance of persistent prayer and wise, gracious interaction with those outside the faith, aiming to make the most of every opportunity to witness effectively. Colossians 4:2-6. Question 16. How are believers in Colossians advised to treat each other within the church community? A. With rivalry and suspicion. B. With kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. C. With indifference to others' needs. D. With competition to establish superiority. Answer. B. With kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. Paul encourages the Colossian community to treat one another with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience, reflecting the character of Christ. Colossians 3:12. Question 17. What does Colossians say about the role of women in the church and home? A. Women should not participate in church. B. Women should lead both the church and the home. C. Wives, submit to your husbands as is fitting in the Lord. D. Women should not speak at home. Answer. C. Wives, submit to your husbands as is fitting in the Lord. Paul specifically addresses wives in Colossians, urging them to submit to their husbands, which he notes is appropriate behavior for those following the Lord. Colossians 3:18. Question 18. What does Paul instruct concerning the use of wisdom in speech? A. To use speech only to convey information. B. Let your conversation be always full of grace, seasoned with salt. C. To speak as little as possible. D. To use speech for persuasion only. Answer. B. Let your conversation be always full of grace, seasoned with salt. Paul advises that speech should be gracious and seasoned with salt, meaning it should be both appealing and preservative, influencing others positively. Colossians 4:6. Question 19. How does Colossians explain the putting off of the old self and the putting on of the new self? A. As an optional aspect of Christian life. B. Through legalistic adherence to the law. C. As a metaphorical change without practical implications. D. As renouncing sinful practices and embracing godly virtues. Answer. D. As renouncing sinful practices and embracing godly virtues. Paul describes the Christian transformation as putting off the old self with its practices and putting on the new self, which is being renewed in knowledge in the image of its creator. Colossians 3:9-10. Question 20. What virtues are believers encouraged to clothe themselves with in Colossians 3? A. Power, influence, and ambition. B. Compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. C. Selfishness, pride, and control. D. Indifference, detachment, and isolation. Answer. B. Compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. Paul exhorts believers to clothe themselves with virtues like compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience, which foster peace and unity. Colossians 3:12. Question 21. How does Colossians discuss the concept of forgiveness among believers? A. Forgiveness is discouraged as it shows weakness. B. Forgive others, if any have a grievance against someone. C. Forgiveness is unnecessary. D. only forgive those who deserve it. Answer B. Forgive others, if any have a grievance against someone. Paul stresses the importance of forgiveness, instructing believers to forgive each other just as the Lord forgave them, thus maintaining harmony within the community. Colossians 3:13. Question 22. What specific warning does Paul give about philosophy and deception? A. To embrace all philosophies as they lead to truth. B. See to it that no one takes you captive through hollow and deceptive philosophy. C. Philosophy is the height of spiritual achievement. D. Deception is not a significant concern for believers. Answer B. See to it that no one takes you captive through hollow and deceptive philosophy. Paul warns against being misled by philosophies that rely on human tradition and elemental spiritual forces rather than on Christ. Colossians 2:8. Question 23. What is said about legalistic practices like food and festival observance? A. They are essential for salvation. B. They are to be observed strictly. C. Do not let anyone judge you by what you eat or drink, or with regard to a religious festival. D. They are the core of Christian practice. Answer C. Do not let anyone judge you by what you eat or drink, or with regard to a religious festival. Paul instructs the Colossians not to let others judge them based on dietary laws or religious observances, emphasizing freedom in Christ. Colossians 2:16. Question 24. How does Paul address the topic of circumcision in Colossians? A. Advocates for physical circumcision as necessary. B. Describes a spiritual circumcision made without hands. C. Ignores the topic entirely. D. Condemns all forms of circumcision. Answer B. Describes a spiritual circumcision made without hands. Paul speaks of a spiritual circumcision, not performed by human hands, referring to the cutting away of the sinful nature through Christ, contrasting it with physical circumcision. Colossians 2:11. Question 25. What are the implications of being buried with him in baptism as stated in Colossians? A. It is a literal burial. B. It symbolizes dying to the old self and rising anew with Christ. C. It is only a public declaration without spiritual significance. D. It should be repeated annually. Answer B. It symbolizes dying to the old self and rising anew with Christ. This phrase illustrates that through baptism, believers symbolically die with Christ to their old sinful ways and rise to a new life, just as Christ was raised from the dead. Colossians 2:12. Question 26. What role does singing play in the life of the Colossian believers according to Paul? A. It is discouraged as it can lead to emotionalism. B. Used to enhance spiritual warfare. C. Sing psalms, hymns, and spiritual psalms with gratitude. D. Only allowed outside of church gatherings. Answer C. Sing psalms, hymns, and spiritual psalms with gratitude. Paul encourages the use of psalms, hymns, and spiritual psalms as a means of teaching, admonishing one another, and expressing gratitude to God, highlighting its role in worship and mutual edification. Colossians 3:16. Question 27. How does Paul contrast the elemental spiritual forces with the freedom found in Christ? A. Claims they are superior to Christ. B. Suggests the synthesis of both. C. Warns against being taken captive by them, as fullness is found in Christ alone. D. Encourages their worship. Answer C. Warns against being taken captive by them, as fullness is found in Christ alone. Paul contrasts the freedom believers have in Christ with the bondage of elemental spiritual forces, emphasizing that true spiritual fullness and freedom are found only in Christ. Colossians 2-8. Question 28. What does Paul say about the public reading of his letter? A. It should be kept secret. B. Ensure that this letter is read also in the church of the Laodiceans. C. It should be read only by church leaders. D. It should not be read aloud. Answer B. Ensure that this letter is read also in the church of the Laodiceans. Paul instructs that his letter to the Colossians be read publicly not only among themselves, but also in the neighboring church of Laodicea, indicating the intended circulation and public reading of his epistles. Colossians 4:16. Question 29. Who are the specific individuals Paul mentions at the end of Colossians? A. Peter, James, and John. B. Tychicus and Onesimus. C. Caesar and Herod. D. Mary and Martha. Answer B. Tychicus and Onesimus. Paul mentions Tychicus and Onesimus towards the end of the letter, highlighting their roles in delivering his messages and assisting him. Colossians 4-7-9. Question 30. What final instruction does Paul give to the Colossians about the letter? A. To ignore the teachings. B. To keep it private. C. To ensure the letter is read in the church of the Laodiceans. D. To destroy the letter after reading. Answer C. To ensure the letter is read in the church of the Laodiceans. Paul's final instruction regarding the letter emphasizes the importance of wider circulation and public reading, instructing that it be shared with the church in Laodicea as well. Colossians 4:16.